Today's guest on Openly Spoken is Lucy Newport. She is the Binge Free and Worthy coach, and she helps highly sensitive and empathic women connect to their innate worth. She helps them free themselves from binge eating, and she helps them feel more at home in their bodies. Lucy does this work because for many years she too lived with low sense of self-worth and body image. She soothed uncomfortable emotions with food. She dieted, overexercised, tried to be, quote, good, and ultimately, she had a binge eating disorder for 14 years. And Lucy was so gracious to sit down and share that story with us today on the podcast. It's such a beautiful conversation. It's so open and raw and vulnerable. It also is a good example of how hindsight is so much clearer than when you're in the moment, because as Lucy is sharing the story and sharing the actions she was taking, she had no idea that what she was doing was binge eating or that she was restricting. And many times, like, we don't know we don't know what we're in when we're in the thick of it. We don't know until we look back. So in this episode, you're going to be hearing Lucy's story. We're going to be talking about how to end binge eating. There will be some helpful tips for you. It also is very helpful to just first and foremost hear somebody's story. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, there will be links in the caption or show notes to find Lucy. Her handle is at Binge Free and Worthy on Instagram. Yeah, I hope that you enjoy this episode. And before I play the podcast intro, I'll play you a little preview clip of what's to come in this episode.
Dieting and trying to change the shape of our bodies in, whatever way it is, it's so normal.
Yeah.
Like, you go to work or go to school or you go and hang out with your family, and it's a conversation that people have all the time. Oh, I'm doing this diet, or oh, this is coming up and I'm trying to lose weight for this. Oh, did you see Debbie has been on this diet and how much weight she's lost? And it's something that is spoken about a lot and that is strived towards a lot. And I imagine that everyone having these conversations is also having this inward battle and these struggles, but we're not talking about it.
Welcome to Openly Spoken, the podcast to help you show up, speak out, and be seen. My name is Celia Antonio. I am your host, and I am also your guide to dropping you into your body for unwavering confidence, authentic self-expression, and effortless creativity. And this podcast is a mix of solo and guest conversations all about self-love, relationships, sexuality, spirituality, womanhood, divine feminine energy, and more. My wish for these conversations is that they help you step into loving and accepting all parts of you, that these conversations help you in building a life that you're absolutely in love with, and that these conversations help you express your deepest truth. You can always connect with me over on Instagram at selfexpressbabe, where I would love to hear your thoughts on your favorite episodes and keep these conversations going. I invite you to get cozy as you receive this episode that's about to come through, that you stay curious, that you ask questions, that you take what resonates, and that you, of course, leave out what doesn't. Thank you so much for being here. Now let's get into the episode. Yay! Hi, Lucy.
Hello.
I'm so excited to be recording with you.
Yay. Yeah, I'm so excited to finally be here with you and get into all of this.
Yeah. So should we start with sharing your journey with binge eating and then how you transitioned that into when the thought process came that you can help others with it?
Yeah, sure. So this story isn't unique to me in any way. It's a really common binge eating story. So hopefully anyone listening to this that struggles with their relationship with food, with their body, with their sense of worth. Hopefully, you can see yourself in parts of this and feel a little bit less alone, because the thing about binge eating is that it can feel really, really fucking lonely. So
Mhm.
I I feel like from a very young age I was predisposed to later on in my teens develop a binge eating disorder. So one, I was a really sensitive, emotional child, and I did not know how to contain my emotions. I didn't know how to process them. I felt really guilty for having these big emotions. Like I'd kind of explode. I'd have like
Mm.
big rage and then be like, oh my God, that's so embarrassing. And I'm so sorry to everyone. And yeah, I didn't feel safe in expressing my emotions either. So this was like one side. Another side is that I was definitely a very insecure child as well, in terms of like my body image, how my body looked, but also in lots of other ways, like I'm not intelligent enough, or I'm not cool enough, or I'm not good enough at the things that you're meant to be good enough at. There's just this real sense of lack and not enough. And on the body image side, I remember being so young. Like, when were the Spice Girls big when we were kids? Maybe when I was like
1997?
1997, yes, when I was
Yeah,
like seven, 8. I remember like looking at Sporty Spice and
I
doing
loved her.
sit-ups. Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. She was my Spice Girl. And doing sit-ups in my bed like every night, being like, I'm gonna do 100 crunches because I want my tummy to look like Sporty
Oh,
Spices. And
yeah.
that's just heartbreaking to think of
Mhm.
this little 7-year-old girl already kind of in that mindset. And then
Mhm.
the kind of third thing that I think led me to later on binge eat is that I definitely felt really restricted around food. So um my mother was very health conscious, and obviously she wanted to take care of us as a family, and like there's no blame there whatsoever, but I was really aware of the things that other children were allowed to eat. Or it wasn't
Mm.
that I wasn't allowed to eat them, but I had much less access to those things. So like my friends would have packets of crisps and chocolate bars, and they'd have sandwiches with like fun fillings in them, and I'd have like a part of raisins and some like cut up red pepper and like a hummus sandwich, and I'd be like, oh, why don't I get to eat all this fun stuff that other people, that my friends get to eat? So quite
Mhm.
early on I had some restrictive patterns with food, and I would like sneak things from the cupboard when I could, like bits of chocolate or even like glacier cherries for baking, things like that. Like whatever I could get, I would get it. I'd even like eat frozen chips from the freezer sometimes, because I'd be like, oh,
Oh.
that's a fun thing, even though this is just like totally disgusting. Like, it's not fun to eat a frozen chip.
They're
So
chalky,
there's
right? Because they're not cooked.
yeah, and just really hard and really cool. So yeah, kind of all of that growing up. And then when I was 16, like, when you go through puberty and then you're suddenly a little bit more curvier and just really conscious of how your body looks. And that really hit me. And I very much wanted to like lose a bit of weight. And looking at photos now, I could see, I wasn't a large girl, like in any way, really, and in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, I wanted to lose some weight. And so, again, bless my mum, she really tried to help me. We came up with this thing called the jar, where if I didn't eat any like sweet treats that day, I'd get a pound in the jar. So I was like,
Nice.
awesome. Yeah, I was like, this is great. I'm gonna lose some weight. I'm gonna feel better in my body, and I'm gonna like get some extra money. This is really great. So I like really went for that, and I very quickly developed some patterns around my eating, which then led to binge eating. So my first like memory of binge eating was going to Tesco's with my friends during school. Like Tesco's a supermarket here in the UK.
Mhm.
And we were prefects. It was our last year of secondary school. So we were allowed to go out the school gates at lunchtime, and we often went to Tesco and like got our lunch and then sat in the park and ate it. And we did that, and I was feeling this real just urge to eat something sweet, the urge to eat what I've been denying myself for a few weeks. And we left Tesco and we're going back to the park. And I said to my friends, oh, my mum asked me to buy this thing for her. I can't remember what it was. And I totally forgot. So I need to go back to Tesco and get that thing. So I went off to Tesco on my own and I bought 2 bags of, they're called Tesco Finest chocolate chip cookies. I think like most people in the UK would know what they are. They're really good, like triple chocolate cookies. Bought 2 bags of those and then went into the toilets in the supermarket and ate all 8 of those cookies
Oh,
all
wow.
in once. Yeah,
Wow.
really quick in this like state of panic, like got to get back to my friends and I've got to get this food and just like, ugh. And that was like my first ever binge. And after that, I was like, oh, that wasn't good. One, like I've undone all of this like dieting that I've been trying to do. I was like, oh, I just lied to my friends.
Mm.
That didn't feel good at all. And yeah, I didn't really understand like why that had happened or how I could stop that from happening again. So I carried on, like the jar continued. I continued to try and lose some weight, and that kept going like from 16 to 19 when I moved to London
Mhm.
when I was 19. And I had, for a little bit of time then, a period where I'd say that I ate pretty like normally, like in quotation marks. Like it was the first time I was ever like making all my meals for myself. I was, yeah, in charge of what I could eat. I could eat what I wanted whenever I wanted. And I really enjoyed that sense of freedom and going to the supermarket and picking my meals and all of that. And yeah, my relationship with food at that time was pretty good. And then things started to get really stressful at
Mhm.
work, like really stressful. And I left the job in the industry that is what I thought that I always wanted to do. And that was like a really low point for me because I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life now. This is what I thought I wanted, and it isn't. And I'm here in London and I'm on my own, and so I really turned to food at that point as a coping mechanism, as comfort. And I quickly gained quite a lot of weight. And as I gained weight, the restrictions became bigger because I was like, okay, I
Mhm.
need to counteract this. And this is then when I moved more into bulimic patterns. I would
Mm.
be really like good again in air quotations during the day,
Mhm.
like fast in the morning, have a light lunch, and then by the evening I'd be like getting all of those binge urges. I'd go to the supermarket, buy all the things, all the crisps, chocolate cookies, just whatever, come home, binge. And then I'd be like, okay, I need to do something about that. So I've just eaten like 4 or 5 days worth of food in one hit. So I would take laxatives and then I would go for a run.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that was a pattern that probably went on for about a year. And I'm
Wow.
not a runner at all. And I really don't enjoy running. And I try to like fool myself and fool my friends and family that I was doing it for my health and I was on this big health kick and I'm going to do like 5K races and then I'm going to get into half marathons and like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I love running. This is like my life now. But really,
And they had no
I
idea
was,
what was really going on at that point.
yeah, oh,
Yeah.
totally. Like no one knew.
Mhm.
Um, so that's what I did for about a year. pretty much every night I'd take laxatives and then go for a run. And I had some really scary times in that where it felt like an organ was going to burst or something like that.
Oof.
And I'd be lying on the floor
Oh,
thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to call an ambulance for myself because I feel
yeah.
so sick. And like, yeah, something was going to burst within me, but I felt too much shame to do that because I'd have to
Yeah.
explain to them what had
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. And that's why it feels so lonely because like it's something you have to keep a secret from
Yeah,
everybody.
totally. The shame around binge eating is such such a massive thing. Like it's really not talked about at
Yeah.
all. Um, so I managed to pull myself out of that at that time. I was like, okay, I can't keep taking these laxatives. They're really damaging my body
Hmm.
long term. This isn't good. And I'm just going to stop running because as well, like my knees were completely ruined, like
Oh.
running on London pavements every night,
Hmm.
just not good. And I was going to see an osteopath to like try and sort that out as well. And I was just like, okay, I
Hmm.
need to stop this. But the binging didn't really stop. And my weight went up and down again a lot. And during this time as well, where I was taking the laxatives and running a lot, there were times when my body was smaller.
Hmm.
And I really remember people at this time saying things to me like, whoa, you look so good, you look so healthy.
Oh, and that does not help.
And that does
Yeah.
not help. On one hand, I was like, this is the validation that I've been looking for.
Yeah.
This is what I want. But on the other hand, I am anything but well and feeling healthy.
Hmm.
And really, I just want someone to help me. And I don't know how
Yeah.
to help myself. So
Hmm.
that was a really strange time, like living within those two contradictions and being really aware of them. Um, yeah, so after that time, I think my weight kind of crept up gradually. People stopped saying these kind of things to me, and I was also really struggling with anxiety. And through this, I got introduced to meditation and
Mm.
yoga and all these wonderful supportive practices. And it's not like I started meditating and overnight I was like free from binge eating. Like, it was this really long process.
Hmm.
And also learning everything I could about binge eating because for the first few years I didn't know it was a thing. I'd never heard of binge
Yeah.
eating. It
Hmm.
was just this strange thing that I was doing and I didn't know how to stop or why it was happening. And then
Hmm.
I learnt, okay, that it was an eating disorder and that there are these things that you can do. So I started doing those things and I started actively looking for help. And there was a coach that I really wanted to work with. And we had like a free consultation call. This was probably like 8 years into binge eating. And it was binge eating spanned a whole 14 years. Like it was a long old journey. And I didn't work with this coach simply because I couldn't afford it. And I know that that help would have been there for me had I asked for it, like from my family, if they'd known that I was really struggling with something and that there was someone that could help me with that. I know that we'd have been able to like pool resources and get me that help. But again, I didn't
Yeah.
want to like have that conversation.
Yeah.
So I didn't, and I didn't get that help. So it was years and years of like piecing it together, working on myself, like buying all the self-help books, the self-development books, doing all the things. And then 2017, me and my partner at the time, we went traveling for 6 months around Southeast Asia. And that was really good for me because it got me out of my comfort zone a lot. Lots of the patterns that I had around binge eating, I couldn't do them because I was always with someone. I was always with
Mm,
my partner, so I couldn't have those like sneaky binges when I was on my own. And
mhm.
also being vegan in Southeast Asia, there was like a limit to what I could eat. Like most days was rice and vegetables, so there were there was lots of Oreos. That's all I remember being like the fun thing to eat in Asia. I can't even look at Oreos now. I just ate too many during that time. Um, and then at the end of that period, I did my yoga teacher training as well. And again, that kind of brought me into this deeper next level of self-awareness and connection to my body. And yeah, I'm really grateful for that time. And I think by the time I came back to London, binge eating was more of a habit. Like it
Mm,
wasn't really serving any purpose anymore. It was just something that I had been doing for so many years. It was just running on repeat. And there were lots of times that I could just stop a binge because there wasn't that charge there anymore. There wasn't that,
mhm.
oh my God, I'm getting so much relief from this. I was just kind of going through the motions of the
Yeah.
binge. So at this time I was like, right, I'm so close. I wanna get help again. And I didn't have much money at all. I just come back to London. I hadn't been working for 6 months. I was like, I want to make it as a yoga teacher. So my financial resources were really small. So I went to my doctor and I felt really scared about having this conversation. I remember like being in tears as I told them about binge eating and the things that I did. And I remember the doctor getting me to lie on the table and she like felt around my stomach and was like, where do you feel the pain? And I was like, well, it's only really like painful when I binge eat and I've not binged today, so there's no pain.
Mhm.
And it was like she completely washed over what I was saying. And she's like, right, I'm gonna send you for some blood tests. And I was like, okay. And then like, what about the binge eating? And again, she's like, let's just see about the blood tests. So I
Mm,
had the blood tests, got a call from the doctor. They're like, okay, your blood's all normal. And it was a different doctor that called me. And I said, okay, that's great. The reason I went to the doctor is that I'm really struggling with binge eating and it's been happening for years and I'm really wanting help. And they're like, oh, there's nothing on this report about binge eating. So you'd have to make another appointment with your doctor. And I was just like, okay, I'm not going down that path. Because I'd really struggled with going to the doctor for things like anxiety and the support that I needed really wasn't there. So I was like, okay, I've been down this path
mhm,
before with that. I didn't get what I needed, so I'm gonna have to really like
mhm.
do this myself.
At this point,
So
though, being able to speak out loud that you needed help, not only to the doctor and to the person that called you, but also the coach that you talked to before and didn't end up working with, that must have been some sort of pivotal moment for you that you've already like 3 times admitted out loud to somebody else that this was
yeah,
an issue.
totally. And it's so scary because you're thinking about the judgments that they're having of you. And
Mhm,
when you hear about conversations about binge eating, they're often like quite dismissive. You get comments like, oh yeah, I overeat all the time, or oh yeah,
mm,
I binged on a pack of crisps earlier, or people who binge eat, they just need more willpower, things like that.
mhm,
Like when people do talk about it, yeah, dismissive is the word that I would use. Um, and also to say that I had told my partner Mark about my binge eating fairly on into our relationship.
okay,
Um, but it was kind of like, this is something that I do a little bit and it's not that bad. Like, I
mhm,
couldn't completely hide it from him, but I definitely didn't tell him everything either. And it's not like a conversation we had consistently where I was telling him what I'd been going through or he was checking in. It was kind of like
mhm.
this little conversation we had like 3 times a year. kind of thing. And I know, again, that support would have been there from him. I just didn't feel like I could talk about it and be completely honest with him,
Mhm.
which again is such a crappy thing about binge eating, is not letting your loved ones in that way.
Mhm. I remember you made a post, I think it was a few months ago, where you talked about how to tell your partner about binge eating. And that's coming up to share because of what you just said. So maybe we can talk about like how to move through those like blocks to tell people. But I also just want to, like, with everything that you said, I've been like taking mental notes. I love how in the very beginning you mentioned that you were predisposed to binge eating, and you mentioned it was because you were very sensitive, insecure about your body. And I feel like so many girls can relate to that. And that's something that's like so prevalent in media. And even now, like little girls have social media with filters. And
Oh
it's
my
really
God.
important to think about like what kind of thoughts about their bodies we're creating for little girls who are watching these like airbrushed people. Um, yeah, so I love how you mentioned that that was like a predisposed kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm so glad I didn't grow up like 10 years later, because
Yeah.
it would have been even harder. Like social media wasn't really a thing until I was 16, 17, 18. Thank God.
Yeah. I remember we had MySpace, I
Oh
think when I
yeah,
was
of
16.
course.
But it was
Yeah,
like you had to wait till you got home and go on your computer. It wasn't like on your phone. So it was
yeah,
different.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I could relate to a lot of your story. I also was very insecure about my body. I also really loved the Spice Girls. I remember at age 11, like starting to make sure I would breathe into my chest because if you breathe into your belly expands. And I somehow
yes,
got that same message that a flat belly is beautiful. And
yeah,
um and for me it was the opposite of like instead of getting curvy, my curves didn't come and I felt like I looked like a boy, but at the same time because of that my body was very straight. So I always wanted that little like cinch at my waist.
hmm,
So then I would restrict food after a certain time. I would wear like shoelaces around my waist to kind of like form something, but like I never told anyone. Like my
yeah,
parents didn't know, but I remember also having that pain that you said where you said that felt like an organ was going to burst. I remember having
yeah,
that too and like telling my mom like, "Oh, my stomach hurts really bad. It feels like something is like moving around in my body." And yeah, and that was just kind of like brushed over. It
yeah,
is it is hard to like admit that seriousness of like what it is that you're going through, and that's what's required to need help, so to get the help. So that's why I wanted to touch on your little piece about how to tell your partner about binge eating. Maybe you can say it also like how to tell any loved one, whether it's a partner or like your best friend or like your mom or something.
yeah, for sure. And I just want to say to what you said then about, your experience and not feeling like you could tell anyone, dieting and trying to change the shape of our bodies in, whatever way it is, it's so normal.
Yeah.
Like you go to work or go to school or you go and hang out with your family, and it's a conversation that people have all the time. Oh, I'm doing this diet, or oh, this is coming up and I'm trying to lose weight for this. Oh, did you see Debbie has been on this diet and how much weight she's lost? And it's something that is spoken about a lot and that is strived towards a lot. And I imagine that everyone having these conversations is also having this inward battle
Mm,
and these struggles, but we're not talking about it. And
yeah.
That's what I really feel like we need to start doing, is having these conversations, which is what we're going to get onto the moment. But like when I first started talking about this, like on Instagram, so many friends and family members and old colleagues reached out to me and said, "Oh my God, I've struggled with the same thing." Or when I was 16, I also binged it. And there were like women who were like my closest friends when we were 16, and I was going through this, and they were also going through this, and we didn't talk about it at all.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
the the loneliness within that experience, we didn't need to have that. So
yeah.
yeah, these conversations are really important. And in terms of having them, I think like starting with the people that are closest to you and who you think will understand you. So maybe that is like a partner or a really close friend, or like if you have a really good relationship with either of your parents, starting there and trying to, I want to say the word casual, but it's not quite the right word, but starting to try and have this conversation in quite, again, lighthearted isn't the word, but we feel like we have to bring everything to it, and it needs to be, and it's going to be this big dramatic conversation. And it doesn't need to be, it can be this really simple, hey, I want to talk to you. There's this thing that I've been struggling with, and can I just tell you about my experience, and can you just listen to it? And it can be as simple as that, and just starting there and
Hmm.
seeing what comes of it. Because from my experience and the people that I've worked with as well, starting from that point, there's often that other side, the other person saying, "Oh my goodness, I really relate to this. I've had this too." And so you can kind of build this conversation around this shared human experience that so many of us seem to have but aren't talking about it.
Hmm.
And something else that's really um, helpful to have is a little bit of information about what binge eating actually is, because so
Hmm.
many people, they don't know, like still they don't know, and they think it's like sometimes emotional eating or like overeating. So being able to be like, can I show you this like article on my phone? This is something that I've been struggling with, and would you mind reading that, so that it's
Yeah.
not just you being like, oh, there's this thing that I do and I'm really worried, and them not really understanding like fully where you're coming from, or that it is this thing that lots of people do. So this isn't everyone's experience. Like I know we've said that lots of people struggle with this, but it isn't everyone's experience. And when I spoke to my partner, he hadn't had that experience himself. So it was
Mm.
really helpful to be able to, show him some other resources. Um, And again, coming back to that first point about kind of keeping it kind of light and casual, it makes it easier for it to be an ongoing conversation. It's not like this big, oh, we've spoken about this thing, it was really big and scary, and I've kind of got that vulnerability hangover from it, and I don't really want to talk about it again. Like it can be this more ongoing, open conversation where you can ask, or you can say, look, we had that conversation last month. Well, this is where I'm at with that now. Or, I said that I've been struggling with this. I actually feel like I really want support now. And can you help me in this way? And being really clear about with yourself, like why you want to have that conversation. Do you just want to be seen and heard in
Mm,
your experience? Are you looking for them to like be more of a supportive role like in your journey? Are you wanting like financial support from them, like if it's a parent or a partner and you want to get help and you can't afford it
mhm,
yourself? So yeah, really within you being clear on what why it is that you want that. um yeah, that's what's coming to me now. With that article, it was really lovely. I kind of wrote my side from it, and then Mark, who was my partner for 12 years, we're no longer together, but we're really close friends. He then wrote an article that's on my
oh,
side, from his perspective as someone who received this information from their loved
should we
one and
put
that.
both of those links in the comments, show notes or caption?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
let's
think
do
that'd be a
that.
really, really nice thing. And I've had more feedback, more people coming to me saying that they've read the side from Mark because it's given them such like relief that
Mhm.
it's okay to have these conversations with people. And for the most part, if someone's in your life and they care about you, they want to help you, they're not going to shame you. So I
Yeah.
think people hearing that is really beneficial.
Mhm. I think another piece to bring in to for people to even feel that courage to have these conversations, to initiate these conversations, and to, like you said, to drop in and see, why do I want to have this conversation? Like, do I want to be married? Do I want financial support so I can get help? I think a great piece to bring in there is, you talked about how yoga and meditation really helped you be in the present moment. And I know we were, writing in our little emails before that we want to talk about how like present moment awareness and like practicing mindfulness is super helpful for binge eating. So, I guess my question is maybe sharing a simple practice for anyone listening. I mean, I know there's
Yeah.
so many different mindfulness practices, so I don't know if there's like one that stands out for you, or maybe we can just even talk about why we think that those are helpful.
Yeah, for sure. To all of that,
Yeah.
yes. So, um, yeah, like practices that bring us into the present moment. So things like yoga, things like meditation, things like breath work, things like dance and walking. I think walking is like one of the best things ever, most underrated things ever.
Especially out
Um,
in nature.
yes, it's good on
Barefoot
every
if you
level.
can in nature. That's
Yeah.
my favorite. Barefoot in nature, let the soil just like get in between your toes.
Yes. Um, oh, this is a total tangent, but I've been doing this thing lately where I collect soil from like
Uh-huh.
out on my walks and I bring it home and I put it in a big bucket with warm water. And as I'm sat doing my work, I've just got this like muddy, warm water soil, but it's just like the best thing ever. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite thing. Um, but yeah, the present moment is just it's where everything happens, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's where life is. It's where when you're having those urges to binge, when you can bring yourself into that place, you can take that step back and be like, oh, okay, what is actually happening here?
Hmm.
Rather than reacting to that urge and just going all into that kind of binge
Hmm.
frenzy energy.
Yeah, like that moment that you mentioned where you bought those 2 bags of cookies and you just like quickly ate it before
Yeah,
getting back to your friends. Mindfulness like slows down that process. You like
totally.
you catch the thought that you want to do it, and it's like there's more time between the thought and like doing the action. There's like more space.
Yeah. And this takes practice. Like
Yeah.
I first read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle like in my early 20s and I was like, "Oh my God, this is this is like it." But it was so many years of like consistent practice and sometimes also not very consistent practice,
Yeah.
if I'm honest. Um of coming back to this moment and yeah, slowing things down and being able to have that choice. And sometimes it is just like the tiniest little moments where you're in that space where you're like, oh, actually, I'm going to choose a different path
Mhm.
and not buy the 2 packs of Tesco finest cookies. And also, these practices, they bring us into touch more with like what is actually going on in my body? Like, how am I feeling in this moment? Am I experiencing anxiety? Am I like um wanting to soothe this big uncomfortable emotion? Like what is actually happening in this moment that is driving me to
Mhm.
binge? So that's been another part. And I feel like for up into my mid-20s, I feel like I was this floating head. Like everything, my experience was all just up in my head. It was just thoughts. Yeah, that's the only way I can describe it. It's like the rest of my body didn't exist because I was so cut off from it.
Yeah.
And so, again, these practices, particularly yoga, and bring your awareness to different parts of your body during the practice, really kind of bridged that connection between my head and my body
Mhm.
and be able to, yeah, better understand what
Mhm.
was going on there, which was a huge thing. And even in terms of like hunger cues, like I don't think I ever really understood when I was like what hunger felt like. Like I never
Yeah.
never considered it. So I never really knew whether I was physically hungry, like needing food because my body needed energy, or if it was because I was in this like lack state because I've been restricting, or whether it was because there's this emotion that I was feeling that I didn't want to feel.
Mhm.
So being able to identify like what is this hunger actually?
Mm.
Is it physical hunger or is it something else?
Mhm. That's a great distinction that you also make in your mini course, which we'll link in the caption or show notes below, where you talked about all the different types of binge eating that it can be emotional. You can be running away from something that you want to feel. And
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that I was a binge eater until I learned more about like the work from you, because when I was younger, I thought that binging went along with purging, that if you weren't purging, you weren't binge eating. But to know that it also goes along with restricting, I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes,
Well, that was
totally.
me. And I still do fall into emotional eating sometimes. Like if I'm stressed, I love me some chocolate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know it's
Thank you
not the
for,
healthiest decision.
you know what? Like, that's okay. And thank you so much for sharing that. And like, food is emotional. Like, we can't get away from that. It's hardwired within us and it doesn't need to not be that way. Like, as when we're little babies and we're hungry and we cry and we're given milk from our mothers from the breast or from a bottle from any other caregiver, like we get that comfort, we get that warmth, we get those soothing sounds, we feel maybe like our mother's heartbeats,
Oh,
like
I've never
all of
thought of
that.
that.
Yeah,
That's so
that is
cute.
that is wrapped up within
Yeah.
our wiring, that comfort and soothing. And also when we eat food, like in those first few bites, we get a dopamine hit. Like
Hmm.
food is pleasurable and comforting. And that's the way it is. And we don't need to like try and deny that.
Hmm.
But it's when we use food to avoid what we're feeling completely, like there's this uncomfortable emotion and I'm not even going to look at it, I'm just going to go straight to food. Or if what was I going to say? If comforting yourself with food is your only source of comfort, then
Mm,
okay, that's not great either. So it's recognizing that yes, food is comforting and pleasurable and wonderful, and enjoying that aspect of food, but also having other ways of like moving through uncomfortable emotions and yeah, allowing yourself to experience that rather than like numbing that out.
mhm. I love that you just normalized that food is an emotional process and that it is a pleasurable thing and that we don't need to step away from that. It's just we just need to be mindful of, is this the only thing that I'm doing to comfort myself or not? And
Yeah.
I think that's a good kind of like segue into we wanted to also talk about like devotional cooking and devotional eating. So we can instead taking that, like switching our stress eating into, I guess, love eating. I don't know if that's a thing.
Yeah, love eating. That's so sweet. Yeah, devotional eating and devotional cooking is something that I've really like connected to in the last kind of year, like as I fully came out of binge eating and really reconciled my relationship with food and my body. It was like, whoa, eating and food is just incredible. It's this
Yeah.
connection to life. It's this connection to my body. Food, the way food grows, we have this little seed and it goes in the soil, and with water and sunlight and the nutrients in the soil, it turns into this whole, like whatever, corn on the cob or like beans, whatever it is. And just like what an incredible process that
Yeah.
is. And like being really thankful for like that abundance of food that we
Hmm.
have and the way that we're provided for, and being thankful for the people who farm our food and get it to the supermarkets or wherever we buy food, like for that whole process, being like, oh my goodness, thank you. And really recognizing that, because it's so easy to
Hmm.
just go out and buy something and eat it. And
Yeah.
that's okay sometimes too. Like, of course, that's practical nature of
Mhm.
eating, but also sometimes it's really nice to really connect into this and to give thanks, and that it being a devotional practice to yourself as well, to your body, like really recognizing what it is that my body needs, being aware of maybe certain foods that I've been craving, being aware of like how much it is that I want to eat. Is it warm foods that I want? Is it cool foods? Like really listening to
Mm.
that and then preparing that food with so much love, like knowing that you're nourishing your body in the way that it wants to be nourished. And it just feels really, really good. And then allowing that eating to be really pleasurable and tuning into all of your senses, like the taste, the texture, how it feels in your body, just
Hmm.
letting it be this whole beautiful experience.
Hmm. And then that pleasure of the food is expanded tenfold when we take the time to really like slow down and think about where it came from and all that gratitude. And then when we sit and eat, to really taste it all. And for anyone like listening who doesn't know where to start, my first introduction into devotional eating was actually, I used to live next to this yoga studio when I was like 25, and it was a bhakti yoga studio. And
Mm.
in bhakti yoga, like devotional cooking is like one of the practices that they do. And while they cook, they're like singing mantras as they're cooking, and they're just like intentionally fusing love into what they cook. And when you go to, even to like a Hindu temple, they do that as well. Well, they'll read from the Bhagavad Gita, they'll do like mantras and stuff, and then they have like a vegetarian dish afterwards. Everyone that's preparing that food, they're like singing mantras, and they're very like, their intention is to just infuse as much love into the food as possible. And I think that's a great branch of yoga to look into, to know where to start. Because for me, that was my change point in like food. Like it went from needing to eat healthy to like just, I don't know, just like really expanding that pleasure and expanding the gratitude and like really thinking about like, wow, these strawberries, like it was a seed and there was somebody watering it and the sun came out and it rained and the soil had enough nutrients and just like so many things had to go right. And the bees who fertilized the flower that then became the fruit. Like there's so many steps that we don't think about with our food. And when we do, like even just adding that into your life can just completely change your perspective on food. And like that, then like food that's made with love, you're putting it into your body, and then that food literally becomes like your a brain cell or like a strand of your hair or an eyelash. Like it turns into what you physically are. And that's just like so beautiful to think about.
Yeah. Oh, so beautiful. Totally. It's just, it can be 20 seconds of like sitting with your plate of food in front of you and just like pouring that gratitude into it. And it completely
Yeah.
changes that experience of that meal for you and how you feel after it. And when you compare that to like that diet mentality and picking apart, oh my God, there's this that I'm eating and that's going to be this much calories. And oh my God, I've got chips and they're going to be really fattening. And
Mm,
like when you compare that to this, it's just like, it's such a different experience.
yeah. Yeah. And you can still like pour love into, ooh, I have an eyelash in my eye. You could still pour love into like chips or crisps or cake or something like something that I like to do if I really only now do this if I'm on a road trip, because when you're on a road trip, at least here in America, the only food on the road is fast food. And if I have to eat fast food, instead of feeling shame about it, I'm like, whatever nutrients are in this, my body is going to absorb them. And I like eat very slow and stuff. And I wanted to bring that up because I wanted to talk about like how what helped you deal with the shame and judgment piece, like the self shame and self judgment piece that comes with eating. I also just saw
Yeah.
the time and I wonder if you have to go right at the hour.
No, this is fine. If this
Okay.
is good with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, it's good with
Yeah.
me. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a
Shame and
call at
judge.
11, so it's like about an hour from now, so I'm good.
Okay, cool. Um, Shame and judgment in terms of like eating certain things or in terms of like how my body looked.
I really thought about it like eating certain things and the part of like where you know you have a binge eating problem, and a lot of shame and judgment for yourself can come through that. And I feel like moving through that is maybe one of the first steps in changing. But you can also talk
Yeah,
about the body stuff too, if you like.
yeah.
Yeah, if that's what's alive
No,
with you,
no,
for sure.
I get you. Um, for me, it was really like looking at, is this shame and judgment that I'm feeling about eating these certain foods, is this like helping me to have a better, more healthy relationship with food, or is it hindering it? And
Mm,
I could, if you look at it in this way, usually you can see that actually it's taking you away from health.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
what's interesting about that is like this health piece of wanting to be healthy for a lot of us is the reason why the binge eating starts in the first place.
yes.
Yeah. Because we're
And
like, we don't want to eat this because it's not good for, yeah, that's
yeah,
wild.
and it's the exact same thing with like the body side. It's like,
Mhm.
has this relationship, has what I've been doing been helping me to like have this healthy relationship with my body, or has it been hindering it. And people often really worry about like gaining weight and binge eating recovery because what like one of the unavoidable, really important things to focus on is like letting go of the idea of losing weight or maintaining the weight that you're at in order to like go through this process.
Mhm.
And there's often a lot of resistance to that. And I had a lot of resistance to that. And it's again, just asking that simple question like, has this focus on trying to lose weight and change the shape of my body helped me to get what I want in terms of how I look, or is it taking me further away from that? And when you sit with that question, it's kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I need to do something differently here.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And did that mindset of like stopping and asking yourself, did that happen after you started practicing the mindfulness, or did that come before?
After, for sure. I can't remember a particular like moment where I started asking myself these kinds of questions. Um, but in terms of that shame part, in terms of what I was eating, do you remember like I guess when we would have been like in our early mid 20s, there was the whole like clean eating thing. Like
Like Whole
ev
30 and stuff?
yeah,
Yeah. I feel
yeah,
like
so
it's always been I feel like dieting has always been in our ears somewhere.
it's always been a no.
In the
It's for sure.
infomercials of like, I remember there was a pill called Hydroxycut here in America where it's like, just take this pill and you'll lose weight.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, for sure. Like it has always been there. I remember when I was like early mid 20s, like really falling into that like juice fasts and eating
Yes, the
everything.
juicing was very popular in our mid 20s. Okay,
Yeah.
this is what you're talking about. Yes.
Yes. And like not eating fried food and everything just being really clean, like really pure. And if you ate things that weren't like that, then you were like bad. It was wrong. And like from the outside, it probably looked like, I was such a good clean eater. I was like always making my meals and taking them to work, and I'd be like really proud of what I was sitting there and eating. And then I'd leave work and I'd go to the supermarket and I'd buy all of these unclean foods and I'd go home and I'd binge eating on them. So it was being like, okay, having this really strict mindset on this is good. I'm a good person. If I eat this, this is the right way. I'm looking after myself, da da da. And eating this way is bad. People can't know that I eat these things. Um, Kind of dissolving that good, bad divide and
Hmm.
being like, okay, I'm going to eat this food anyway. I may as well start eating it within my meals within the day and actually enjoying it and getting from it what I
Yeah.
want to get from it
Yeah, like
rather than it
actually.
being,
Hmm.
yeah, actually allowing it rather than it being
Hmm.
this shameful hidden thing and being like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna have this chocolate bar at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
at work because
Yeah.
I want it and that's okay.
Yeah.
And in me doing that, like hopefully someone else can be like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, Lucy's like having
Hmm.
a chocolate. I'm gonna do that too because I've been really wanting some chocolate, but I always feel like I can't because Lucy's always so good in the office. Like, yeah, taking away that divide of this is good food, this is bad food, and really allowing those things that I want to be part of like my normal everyday eating experience. And this is something that I teach in the mini course that you referenced before. It's like normalizing these foods. And I know that's not a very like sexy word, normalizing foods, but this process of taking the foods that you would normally binge eat and bringing them into your everyday eating experiences in ways that feel really safe, so that you take away that really like visceral, oh, I'm not allowed to have this, so I really want it. That, because that is another part of human nature. Like, we want what we can't have.
Hmm.
So eating these foods at times of days where you wouldn't normally binge, so maybe like in the morning is quite a safe time for people to incorporate these foods, eating them when you're around other people, because normally when
Mm.
people binge eat, they're doing it in privacy. Um, Eating it when you're already like nourished, or you've got food within you, so you're not eating on an empty stomach, and you're not gonna like eat more than you really want to eat of it. So it's like, I'm having lunch and I'm gonna have some chocolate
Hmm.
after that. Like, all these little things that make food, these like off limit binge foods, more normal. So for an example, do you have Weetabix minis in the US at all? Do you know what they are?
No, I've never heard of those.
Okay. So they're like little is cereal, little Weetabix that are like chocolate chips, and that was like one of like my main binge foods.
Hmm.
I'd only ever buy them when I was, planning a binge. I would never like buy it as part of my normal shopping. So I started buying it as my normal shop. I'd eat it in the morning with my housemates as my breakfast, instead of the like super healthy breakfast that I would have like previously made, or having that with that, and letting it be, I'm having my breakfast, I'm eating the cereal, that's okay. And to begin with, often in this normalizing process, we will like eat a lot of the food, or we will still binge eat on it, but gradually we learn that, okay, I'm allowed to have this. I'm showing myself that I'm allowed to have this. It's not off limits. It is safe for me to want it. And I know those times when I do want it, I can get it. So actually, I'm not having this like big desire. There's this not that like excitement, like, oh God, I've got to get this when I can because I'm not allowed it.
Hmm.
That whole thing. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit about kind of the normalizing process, and taking the shame out of those foods.
Hmm. And when we normalize things that we want, like how you mentioned the chocolate part, it allows us to really receive what we desire. And I wanted to mirror that back because I know that you have this theory that you said about, what was it that you said? Something about having a hard time receiving. Empathic.
Yeah,
You have a theory about empathic women who binge eat that they have a hard time receiving. Do you want to touch
yeah,
on that?
yeah. This is okay. This is like a working theory, and I'd be
Okay.
really interested in like anyone else's thoughts. This is something that I've recognized in myself, and I've shared with a couple of clients, and they were like, "Oh my God, yes." So I've been having more conversations about this, and people are like, "Whoa, yes, that's me too." So I've been aware of patterns like throughout my life of like being in lack, not feeling enough, and also restricting. So like this whole lack restriction thing in like food, not feeling like I'm good enough, just everything. And even like not being able to receive presents when it's my birthday, like feeling so embarrassed when people
Oh.
are trying to give me things and being like, oh, don't look at me. This feels too much. And I think particularly with women who are like highly sensitive or empathic, like when you feel, it can feel a lot. So we kind of close off from feeling
Hmm.
because it can be really uncomfortable. And because we're closing off from feeling, we're closing off from receiving. And that can be receiving in all kinds of forms. So I've been talking about this lots in terms of like my relationship with money, like feeling really, oh, like just not being able to receive because there's this part of me that's like really shut off from that. And it's quite subtle, but this is where I see my work with food and my body and everything in my life being right now is my ability to receive.
Mm.
If that makes any sense at all, being able to receive the nourishment that I need, being able to receive the love that I want, being able to be seen by other people, being able to receive money, being
Mhm.
able to receive the time that I need to rest and go through things. Without that, oh no, it's too much to
Mhm.
receive this. I can't physically hold this because it's too much.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense because how we do one thing is usually how we do all things. So like if there's an area of our life where we can't receive, where with binge eating, like it might seem like we don't have a problem of receiving because you're eating these large amounts of food, but really to be able to eat those large amounts of food, you're kind of like checked out as that's happening and you're rushing through it. So you're not actually receiving that food. You're
Yeah,
not actually receiving it. It's just like you're just rushing through. So that makes sense to me.
yeah, yeah. And that's my practice now. Like when I'm eating, it's just to like, as I'm breathing in, like receive fully the experience. And
Hmm.
it's really simple, but it's been such a profound thing in my life. And like when I'm out on my walk, again, just breathing in, receiving what is going on around me. When I'm feeling a strong emotion, like seemingly positive or negative, breathing in, receiving that. And
Yeah.
it's interesting when you do that, if you try it, to see how uncomfortable that might feel to just receive something really simple. Just to even receive a breath fully, it can feel like, whoa. It can feel like a lot. Um, and that just reminded me of you talking about pulling in your tummy when you were younger. I remember when I first started going to yoga classes, the teacher came over to me and was like, "Oh, you need to like when you inhale, you need to like expand your tummy. At the moment, you're like sucking your tummy in, and that's called
Mm,
reverse breathing." And I was
mm.
just like, "What?" And this took me so many lessons to understand that I have been breathing in reverse for years. I didn't even know that you could breathe in reverse.
Yeah. Where when you take a breath in, your stomach goes in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
take a breath in, suck in, suck everything in, exhale, let it go just a little bit. So this act of like fully receiving a breath and letting your tummy expand
Yeah.
when you've been in this place of like cutting everything off, that can feel like the most liberating thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds so small and so little, but it's just like really opening up so much for me right
Yeah.
now.
Have you seen Rosie Reese from Yoni Pleasure Palace? She has a hashtag called Stop Sucking It In,
Oh no.
where she encourages women to post photos of like their bellies just like relaxed and just to show how like being a little bloated is normal. And I think she's been doing that for a few years. And I think now recently she has a shirt on her shop that says, "I'm not pregnant, I'm just not sucking it in."
Oh,
And
that's
I love
awesome.
that. I love that like with this journey of like mindfulness and getting to know our bodies, like we allow a certain part of our bodies that we've been clenching release and relax. And with this topic of binge eating, like probably everyone would relate to sucking in their bellies and
Yeah.
how freeing it is to allow your stomach to relax and exist, you know?
Yeah. My goodness, yeah. And I find myself still doing it all the time, like this unconscious, depending on who I'm around, especially sucking my tummy. And then when I become aware of it, it's like, whoa, okay, let it go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Relax, let yourself breathe, let
Yeah.
yourself take up the space that you need to take up because that's my body
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah. So there are two questions I want to ask you that I like to ask every guest. And then
Ooh,
after that, we'll talk about where people can find you, find your work, and any resources you want to include in the caption or show notes.
lovely.
Okay. So the first question is, what does self-love mean to you?
Oh, self-love is very much about acceptance, acceptance of like where I'm at in any given moment and how I'm feeling. Because for a long time, I thought certain feelings were wrong and that I shouldn't feel that way, even though I am feeling that way. So I should feel that way. And acceptance of how my body looks on any given day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's what's coming up for me right now is just being in that total acceptance and allowing of what is because it is.
Beautiful. And then the next question is, what's your favorite part about being a woman?
Oh, the favorite part about being a woman for me is the wisdom that our bodies carry in the sense so everybody's bodies carry so much wisdom, but the the cycle of a woman's body, the monthly cycle that we go through, the wisdom within that, and the wisdom in like being able to grow a whole other being within us just totally blows my mind. And our bodies always know like what they're doing. The fact that we
Yeah.
don't have to like tell ourselves to breathe, it's when you stop and think about it, it's really, really mind blowing. And this is I would never have said that like a few years ago. I used to really like hate the fact that my body went through this monthly cycle and that I had to bleed every month and that, this was
Mm,
something that I really pushed away. And I was like, it's so unfair that women have to go through this
yeah.
and that men don't. But actually, oh my goodness, what a gift it is that our bodies can do this and the information that is encoded within us is just incredible. It's
Yeah.
deep, deep wisdom. Yeah,
Yeah. I can relate. It wasn't until 2021 where I started loving that I have a cycle every month.
yeah. Same, probably around that same time
Yeah.
for me too. Yeah,
I think there might have been a collective awakening with that within that time because
yeah,
yeah, a lot of people have ventured into and it's an ongoing thing. Like that was only 2 years ago. There's still more deepening for me at least.
oh my God, yes, so much. And a few of my friends are like going through pregnancy at the moment, and I love hearing
Oh,
these little bits that they're learning or they're experiencing, and it's like, whoa, our bodies are incredible. Like
yeah.
so incredible.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
for the people listening, where can they find you? And if there's anything that you want to share specifically about who your work is for or what kind of resources you'll be giving for this episode, I'll give the floor to you for that.
Yeah, so I coach under the name of Binge Free and Worthy. So my website is www.bingefreeandworthy.com. And on Instagram, I'm at binge.free.and.worthy. So dots
That'll be
between
in
each
the
word
caption.
in the show notes.
Yeah.
Cool. And I specifically work mostly with women who are like highly sensitive or empathic, and struggle not just with the restrictive side and diety side of binge eating, but also with the emotional side. I feel like that was my journey and I really relate to these women, and there's a lot, a lot that I can share with them. And I've got two main resources that you can jump into. So I've got the mini course that Celia and I have both mentioned, and that's all about how to break out of that binge and restrict cycle and how to normalize these foods. And the other one is a little masterclass on how to stop your emotional binge eating. So, really getting into that emotional side. And both of these you can get on my website. I'm currently making a quiz at the moment called "What is
Ooh,
your binge eating recovery journey?" Yeah,
ooh, that's fun.
which yeah, I've been working on for a little while actually.
Okay. If that's
It's a
ready
really
by the
fun
time
thing.
this publishes, the link will be in the caption or show notes.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. And yeah, I work predominantly one-on-one with women. In the future, I will have a self-paced recorded class and a group offering, but this is something that I'm really taking my time on creating, so it's not imminent. And yeah, if you're interested in working with me, just reach out.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for spending this time with me. Oh, this has
Yay.
been great, Lucy. I'm so glad that we met.
Yes, me too. So glad. Thank you, Celia.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Openly Spoken. I know that there's an abundance of content online, so I really appreciate you giving me your ears today. If this episode shifted something for you, please share this with a friend and/or write us a podcast review if you're listening to this on iTunes so that more people can find this. If anything shifted for you from this episode that you want to have a conversation about, I would love to hear from you. Just send me a DM over on Instagram at selfexpressbabe, and that is in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.